forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March.
Again, rebounded by Indiana. The game is over.
For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk,
Oh, he just shook the gravity.
and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Dace.
And we are back with the season premiere of, well, another season of Bigger Ten. I'm Steve Dace. It's been so long. In case you forgot me, I wore my name tag today alongside my co-host and, of course, never partner, the one and only undead himself, the great Aaron McIntyre. Good to see you, brother. How has your long, painful off-season gone thus far?
It's painful, that's for sure, anytime when you're not around college football. And this is just, I'm not trying to pull your pants down here. This is one of the months of the year where your characterization of me as undead or Nosferatu is actually incorrect. The rest of the time, like from September to March, it's not correct. Can you see that?
There is a faint hint of skin pigment there.
There is a hint
even
of pigmentation over here because I've actually been outside because I have to because I have to mow because I own a house now.
That's right. Look at you, all grown up.
I know.
I mean, right before our eyes. It's truly amazing. All right. Well, you know what? I think, what is today? The Tuesday, at the time we're taping this
17th.
is Tuesday the 17th.
Yep.
Thursday will mark 100 days until the start of the 2022 college football season. Can you believe it? 100 days. And we're just a couple of weeks away from the preseason college football magazines beginning to hit the store shelves as well. So what better way to start off a new season of Bigger Ten, Aaron, than to look back on spring football and some of the big storylines coming out from the Big Ten. And we're going to take a segment each on the Big Ten East and then on the Big Ten West. And then we'll call it a day for our first episode of the new season of Bigger Ten. Let's get started with the big 5 topics on the Big Ten East. And let's start with the defending champs, not just of the East, but also of the Big Ten in general. Michigan, which has more Big Ten championships than any other program, but had not won one since 2004, had not won one outright since 2003. Think about that. You're married now with a house and a kid. You were 10 years old the last time before this past season Michigan was the outright Big Ten champion. Not that I'm bitter, angry, or disgusted that it took that long. However, during the spring, Jim Harbaugh, Michigan's head coach, reigning national coach of the year, said his program was, quote, scary good right now, unquote. Michigan does return. I think it is 33 of the 47 players that were on the 2-deep for the Orange Bowl in the college football playoff. But if you watched the NFL draft, there's a couple defensive guys they've got to replace that matter. 2 of them were picked in the first round, one of them the number 2 pick. Another young man that would have been a first-round pick if not for blowing out his Achilles heel during NFL workouts. So your thoughts, let's start at the top. Jim Harbaugh saying his program is, quote, scary good right now.
So I think we had these conversations late last season after, it seemed like maybe Jim Harbaugh, old dog, had learned a new trick or two, and then he went and tried to shop his services to various NFL teams. We had part of this conversation about, is this sustainable? Is what the reaction of the team will be now that expectations are high, because they are high. I mean, they are coming off a CFP appearance, obviously, as you just mentioned, their first outright Big Ten championship since I was yay high. And what are things going to be like? Because it's one thing when you've got a bunch of really talented, as I said, all at last offseason and proved to be right. It's one thing when you've got a bunch of really talented 18 to 23-year-olds who are told that they are dog crap, okay? It's one thing. Now you've got a bunch of really talented 18 to 23-year-olds. A lot of them, as you pointed out, are coming back actually off of that historic team last year. Now it's one thing to tell you, well, you're not dog crap. And in fact, you are really, really good and your expectations are really, really high. How are they going to respond to that? And coming from your coach, he must be really confident, but this seems like old Jimmy to me. And I don't know if that's a good thing. It might be a good thing. It might be old Jimmy, old Stanford Jimmy. It might be first couple of seasons at Michigan Jimmy, even though things were a little, I don't know, the expectations were not met, as you well know, initially. But it sounds like old Jimmy to me, where it's really, really confident and a lot of rah-rah, and it could be a new page being turned here, or it might just be old Jimmy.
Next, let's go to what I think is actually the biggest storyline in our conference for this football season. Because when you look at Michigan, I think they're going to be at least as good as they were last year. It'll be different. It'll be more explosive offensively. They don't have the two, the greatest pair of pass rushing bookends in the history of the program, which is saying something. They don't have that. But when you look at Michigan's schedule, I think they are going to be at least as good as they were last year. So the question comes down to, will Ohio State be better, particularly at the point of attack? We watched Oregon, and maybe we should have guessed and known in that really early non-conference game last year how Oregon ran all over them, if you remember that, right? Maybe we should have thought, and then you saw what Michigan did when they played as well, just dominated the line of scrimmage. Well, obviously Ryan Day has had enough, because offense ain't the problem, man. Remember how they had two of the top 15 picks in the NFL draft sit out the Rose Bowl at the same position, and then a lot of guys that most people had never heard of go out there and help C.J. Stroud throw for 400 yards. They're not going to struggle. And you have with Jackson Smith and Jigba, you've got Travion Henderson, who I think may be a Heisman Trophy candidate at tailback. Offensively, Ryan Day, and with the way they recruit, they're going to put up numbers. But at some point, this is the Big Ten. And yeah, at some point, it snows in games and stuff, and you can't turn them into a video game every single week in this league. And so Ohio State's got to do something about the defensive side of the football. This is now Jim Knowles, almost said Michael Knowles, wrong format. Jim Knowles comes over from Oklahoma State, where he did a fantastic job with the Cowboys last year. They got to the Big 12 championship game. They won a major bowl game for one of the few times in school history. One of the best defenses that the school has ever had. He comes over now to take over. He is already Aaron. I'll get all your names right sooner or later. Aaron, he is already Ryan Day's fourth different defensive coordinator, and he's heading into his fourth season. I think if can this guy do for Ohio State what Mike McDonald did for Michigan last year, where he stabilized that defense and then made it a weapon as the season went on? If the answer to that question is yes, then the top-end offensive talent Ohio State has, unless they just have an off day, they're still scoring 28-31, right? If the answer is yes, they will reclaim their championship status after a 1 year in exile. If not, I don't care if the game's in Columbus or not. I think Michigan will dominate the line of scrimmage against them again. So I think this storyline here, do they finally have the answer at defensive coordinator? I think it's the key storyline, except for maybe the future of like a Scott Frost that determines the trajectory of the entire conference race this year.
Well, in all three phases of the game, the number one phase that you can make the most difference in just coaching and attitude of the players is special teams. Now, second behind that, I believe, is defense, because on offense, if you have a lot of Jimmys and Joes, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. You can get by without the great coaching. You can get by on talent on offense. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to be perfect, but you can get by on that. That's the good news for Ohio State, is that if this guy is a good coach, and if he can get the most out of the players that they already have, whether it's through scheme or motivation, they can be fine, because the style of offense they played, what happens when you put up numbers like Ohio State can put up and has put up on offense? You're running a lot of plays on defense as well. You end up running a lot of plays on defense, and it's almost kind of a loss leader in a weird way. You see with this, to some extent, maybe not last year with my Kansas City Chiefs in the NFL, where your offense is moving so fast it almost wears down the defense. You're not playing that complementary of football, but you just need to be better than the other offense or stop them, a handful of times throughout a game, and you're going to come away with a win. It's not going to be a shutout. You're not going to be consistently only giving up less than a couple of touchdowns a game. But when you've got an offense like Ohio State has, you just need to be adequate to above average on defense to be a really, really good team. So, and defense can be fixed, as I said, with a lot of good coaching and attitude adjustments. And so hopefully for Ohio State fans, that's what they're going to get.
Do you think it's fair to say, tell me if you think this statement is true. Michigan has, 2022 Michigan has a higher floor. 2022 Ohio State has a higher ceiling.
I agree. Yep.
Because that's kind of what I'm trying to say with how important I think the Knowles hire is. If he's the missing link, then the way they recruit, they have a high enough ceiling that Michigan could be 11-0 and number 1 in the country and go into Columbus and depending on how fast the track is, get run out of there. Okay.
But if he doesn't pan out, they've got a lower
Michigan
floor
can, yes,
than,
yeah, because Michigan can make them play in a phone booth again, and they showed last year in 2 games against Oregon and Michigan, 2 teams that could stand up to them at the point of attack. They weren't comfortable doing that. We saw Utah almost beat them as well, even though their starting quarterback got knocked out in the Rose Bowl. Let's go to Michigan State, who was the big surprise in this division last year. And so we mentioned that Jim Harbaugh was the national coach of the year, but he didn't win Big Ten coach of the year. That also deservingly went to Mel Tucker with the phenomenal job he did. So maybe it was just the fact that I had just watched Ohio State's spring game. All right, so I took a day a couple weeks ago and taped a bunch of the spring games and watched them all together. But brother, I got to tell you, Michigan State looks small to me, like noticeably small. And I know they've had a lot of transient traffic both ways in the transfer portal, but I wonder if can the transfer portal be for college football what free agency is for the NFL, which is every now and then it's a great immediate infusion of talent. But the teams that win in the NFL aren't the ones that spend lavishly on multiple players in free agency every year. They're the teams that draft and develop, and then when they're close, they maybe go get that one guy, like the Rams did with Von Miller, for example, right? And I just, as I watched Michigan State's spring game and thought they were noticeably smaller than the other teams I watched, I just started wondering, are they kind of in a no man's land right now? Are you really going to hit pay dirt with a Kenneth Walker in the transfer portal every single year? Because they looked like an underdeveloped team to me compared to some of the other teams that I watched, on BTN. What do you think?
Well, I think between I thought we were going to get this answer a couple of years ago with Lovie Smith and Illinois, and I think we did to some degree. You live by the transfer portal, die by the transfer portal, and I have a feeling we're going to get that answer with Michigan State this year. Mel Tucker, 2 years now, he's done a fantastic job, much to my chagrin in terms of the predictions that I gave out week by week here on the channel. But he's done a fantastic job. You don't have the kind of success that they've had without being a good coach. But it's also, you got to have players. You got to have players who are aware and are familiar with your system. And when you've got kind of a revolving door that Michigan State has had, you got to wonder if that's going to catch up to them and catch up sooner than later.
Let's go to Penn State. Watching them, and if you watched their team last year, defense was phenomenal. There's a notion that Sean Clifford was not good last year. I mean, he didn't light the world on fire, but, Aaron, he had a 21-7 touchdown interception ratio. That's pretty good, man. That's pretty good. You can do a lot with that. But here's the thing. Penn State, I don't think, won a single game last year when Jahan Dotson didn't score a touchdown, which tells you that Clifford is a solid quarterback, but it can't be a quarterback-centric offense. It's going to rely on the playmakers around him. Mm-hmm. And man, I mean, it was that I watched their spring. It was a slog trying to figure out where big plays were going to come from. I didn't see a lot of playmakers. We saw their running game with all those highly recruited tailbacks struggle a year ago. It kind of looked like this. It kind of looked like the same team that I saw last year, except this time there wasn't Jahan Dotson out there.
I'm going to have similar analysis for a West team for this one. It doesn't really matter. I guess this is a chicken or egg type of thing, but it doesn't really matter if he's got playmakers around him if he's not getting the ball to him. Now, is he not getting the ball to Jahan Dotson last year in the games that they lost because Jahan Dotson's not getting open or because he can't get the ball to him. It's a chicken or egg type of thing. I think I'm a little bit more critical of Clifford than I think you are. And I think it really doesn't matter if they have playmakers if they can't consistently get the ball to them for one reason or another. And to me, the common denominator there is the guy taking snaps. Like you said, he's not terrible, but he's not what they require. He doesn't have that it factor that a Trace McSorley had. He doesn't have the balls to the wall factor and the clutch factor that I think he brought. So to me, this comes back to quarterback, and I'm going to have a similar analysis. I wonder if you can guess who for a West team.
I can't even imagine what Nittany Lion fans are thinking reading these early mock drafts for 2023, seeing their transfer, Will Levis, as a first-round mock. Now, keep in mind, I mean, this time last year, Spencer Rattler was considered the number one pick in every mock draft, right? He's going to be the starting quarterback at South Carolina this year. Okay, so it's early, but still, that has to be just making you want to chew on your fist to see that if you're a Penn State fan. Finally, let's get to Indiana. And, we started off here talking about, in the East, talking about Jim Harbaugh, who a year ago at this time, it looked like he was dead man walking, right? That's what he looked like. And goes on to be National Coach of the Year. A year ago at this time, it looked like Tom Allen was the new hotness, right? Well, Indiana has this offseason paced our conference with the most transfer portal action both in and out, completely trying on the fly to reinvigorate a roster and a program that after one of its all-time greatest seasons in the COVID year of 2020 and darn near won a Big Ten championship, absolutely and completely face-planted a year ago. So what do you make of this with Tom Allen? Are we are those good signs that he's grabbing that roster by the throat? Is it a panic move? What do you think?
This strikes me a little bit as panic, because I think what happened to Indiana last year is you weren't going to sneak up on anybody. In fact, you were, in some respects, you were given the respect that you earned from the previous season, and that didn't really work out well for them. So this strikes me as a panic move. However, after a season like that, it's maybe not a bad idea to get a lot of fresh blood in there and get a lot of motivation in there as well. As I said with Michigan State and earlier a couple of years ago with Illinois, you live by the portal, die by the portal. We've seen Illinois surprised by picking off a bunch of transfer portal athletes. We saw that with Michigan State, as we talked about. So it'll be fascinating to see with Indiana. Unfortunately, the division that they're in is the division that they're in. That's always going to be a handicap with them. But I think this season, even maybe more than last season, we're going to be able to really grasp. Tom Allen's coaching ability, not just his ability to build a culture, which is a part of that, but his actual coaching ability this season.
All right, we'll come back. So we gave you our post-spring storylines and outlook on the East Division. We're going to do the same for the West here in just a moment. All right, let's get over to the West Division now, Aaron, and let's look at the Big Five storylines in the Big Ten West coming out of spring football. Let's start with the Huskers. And I got to tell you, brother, I was impressed with what I saw from them in the spring. There were good-looking athletes all over the field. There were explosive plays. And they had one of those modified, it's not like, golf, the modified Stapleford scoring system, but that modified scoring system where, defensive teams get points as well, okay? And there were big plays happening on the offense and the defense. That's what you want to see. You want to see give and take, right? You want to see both units getting theirs. You don't want to see one unit necessarily dominate the other, which is what you saw in the Penn State game where the defenses on both sides just completely clamped down on the offenses, and you can't blame the weather. It was a beautiful day. In the Nebraska spring game, there were fireworks everywhere. A ton of big plays. They bring in Casey Thompson, of course, as the starting quarterback now, the transfer from Texas. I do think he'll be an upgrade over Adrian Martinez. If for no other reason, he'll just take better care of the football, I think. Well, they also got a massive addition here in the month of May. O'Shawn Mathis Wallace, maybe the best edge rusher returning in the Big 12 Conference from TCU. With Gary Patterson's retirement, he is elected to transfer, and it looked like he was heading to Texas or USC, and then at the last minute, surprised, shocked everybody, and went ahead with Nebraska instead. I think that's a huge addition for the Huskers. So, dare I say, we are talking about a program that so far under Scott Frost has not even managed to get bowl eligible. But as much as I was surprisingly concerned with what I saw from Sparty, I was surprisingly impressed with what I saw out of Nebraska, Aaron.
Yeah, my take on Nebraska going into this season is similar to my take on Michigan last season, where I kind of gave up on Jim Harbaugh, still owing him what respect he was due, but I just said if they're going to have any level of success this year along the lines of what they expect or even exceeding expectations for them, it's really going to be mostly because the players decided to do that and to perform well, not necessarily the coaches, because I'm not really sure if Scott Frost has changed personally or as a coach or evolved in any meaningful way. I just know that if they are going to have success, it's because that locker room is strong, and they're going to say, over my dead body, when they're trying to close out a Michigan or an Iowa or fill in the blank team that they lost by a possession to last year. It's going to be because of those players. And hearing this in the off season that they're actually making some plays and that they apparently do have some studs, reason for a little optimism if you're a Nebraska fan.
Maybe some other reasons for optimism elsewhere, and that is Madison, Wisconsin. The last couple of years, you and I have talked a lot on here about too much chatter from Wisconsin.
Players parking their mopeds in a no moped zone.
And quarterbacks haven't done a damn thing with the selling branding T-shirts and all. Just not Wisconsin-y stuff. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And have you heard? There's like nothing. Just crickets, man. Total radio silence out of Madison, Wisconsin since the season ended. And if you're a Wisconsin fan, isn't that exactly what you want? They're like the Calvin Coolidge of the Big Ten. The business of America is business. The business of of Wisconsin football is say nothing and just show up on Saturdays. We do our talking on Saturdays. And I'd be a little concerned about that if I was a Big Ten West team. The return of no drama Wisconsin, because there's been plenty of drama around Wisconsin the last couple of years, and we've seen them fall short as a result.
Yeah, and I've sent this to you before. There's this great article at SB Nation. It was published probably 6 or 7 years ago, detailing each phase of the college football. Oh yeah, it's a great article. Yeah. I believe the phase that we're in right now is you hear about some player somewhere getting charged for parking their moped in a no moped zone, which is code for getting a DUI, getting an assault charge, getting battery, something like that. You haven't really heard of that. Okay, last year, didn't we have running backs stabbing each other?
Yes.
In Madison? Yeah. And you haven't heard that. So that's a good, I'm an Iowa fan. If there was something amiss up there, I would be the first to know, probably. I haven't heard anything. So that is a good sign for Wisconsin, as much as it pains me to say.
Maybe the worst personnel news of the spring came from Purdue. Milton Wright, big-time recruit at wide receiver. A couple times David Bell was hurt last year. He filled in very admirably. He was expected to be the alpha dog receiver for the Boilermakers this year, with David Bell now in the NFL. Milton Wright, academically ineligible for the 2023 season. So, Purdue's team last year, Aiden O'Connell had a phenomenal year. But, if you were going to list their top 5 players on that team last year, he'd be on the list. But 3 other guys that would be on the list are George Karlaftis, David Bell, and Milton Wright. And the problem with losing Wright is you spent the entire offseason trying to generate, and create an offensive flow around him, and now he's not going to be there. That is a big loss for Purdue.
I don't think so. Tyrone Tracy Jr., I mean, he was a much heralded Iowa wide receiver recruit. Didn't really do a whole lot in Iowa. Transfers to Purdue. He's going to have like at least 5 touchdown catches against Iowa, and he's probably going to be their stud this year.
Sounds like
seriously though, he does fit well in their offense. So I think they'll be fine.
Okay. Sounds like you've seen that movie before, maybe.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to Minnesota. If you look at our team total talent ratings that we had on last week's episode of the Michigan podcast, post-spring, now I don't break these down by class and everything for you. I keep that information to myself because I frankly use it to get ahead of betting markets. So I can't get ahead of betting markets if I let you guys see every data point I have, right? So I keep some of them to myself, but I'll tell you this. Minnesota has the most returning 5th and COVID year senior points of any roster in the Big Ten, and it's like by margin. This is going to be a very experienced team that the Gophers are returning, including guys like Muhammad Ibrahim returning. They're bringing back Kirk Soraka as OC. Remember the last time he was in Minneapolis? Tanner Morgan not only looked competent, he had the 4th highest passer rating in the history of the Big Ten Conference, and then last year was not that. I mean, if I were a Gopher fan, I'd be pretty excited about what we have returning for this year based on those kinds of numbers.
For me, this is a prove-it year for Philip John Fleck. Not that he's been terrible since he arrived in Minneapolis, but if he's going to be able to consistently, and by consistently by Minnesota standards, I mean like once every 3-4 years, get to 9-10, that kind of echelon, this would be the year to do it. And if he can't, I haven't really studied their schedule in depth, but I would say if he's not at least in the 8-9 with a couple of should have had type of games, maybe time to pump the brakes on the PJ Fleck train.
Finally, your favorite team. Let's close out with the defending West champions, Iowa. No movement from the Hawkeyes at all, because Iowa's not bringing a quarterback in like May or June from the portal, right? That's just the most un-Iowa thing ever, okay? So Iowa made no substantive efforts to upgrade the quarterback position whatsoever after what we saw last year. So I'm just going to state that and then ask Aaron, as a Hawkeye fan, your thoughts.
We got some new route trees.
The look on your face.
That's the word out of Iowa City. We've got some new route trees.
It's the most Iowa thing ever to introduce the term route tree in 2022 and then say we got new ones.
Revamping the route trees.
I mean, we're laughing. They did win the Big Ten West last year, so there's that.
They didn't score an offensive touchdown, I believe, a passing touchdown, I think, in the last, 5 games of the regular season?
Last 2 years, they are 14-5, right? Something like that, I think it is. Yeah. They're 15-5, I think it is.
Imagine what their record would be if they had a competent offense.
Could get a passing touchdown? Yeah. Hey, you know what? If it's 15-5 the last 2 years without passing touchdowns, what would it be with them? Yes.
My analysis is kind of similar to Penn State. Iowa actually has some pretty decent talent at the skill positions right now. Probably their best roster of wide receivers, I don't know, since the mid-2000s. We're going back 15, 16 years now. It's not going to matter unless something has changed or clicked with Spencer Petras and the entire offense. Because I don't think it's just Petras. I don't think it was just him to begin the season. I think their offensive line was trying to gel. But then as he just continued to get pressured and sacked, he got happy feet and that. It was just a cluster in some respects last year. I think we saw some glimpses of what they can do during the bowl game. But I just overall, I'm not going to get into magical thinking with him, especially with Kirk Ferentz. The dude overall doesn't change. It's by design, but he doesn't change.
All right, there you have it. We'll come back, get to some feedback and Twitter poll results here in just a moment. This week's Twitter poll results, we asked you coming out of spring football, which Big Ten team is most likely in position to rebound from a disappointing 2021? Overwhelmingly, Penn State was your selection at 65%. 29% of you said Nebraska. I might actually choose them. Because of the division that Penn State is in.
Correct.
And they've got an early road game at Auburn. And I like Nebraska getting that early game against Oklahoma at home, new coaching staff at Oklahoma, on the road for the first time. Remember, Huskers played their asses off in Norman a year ago. Only 7% voting for Indiana there. So it appears that a lot of people are beginning to think that Tom Allen is kind of a one-hit wonder, a little Kaja Gugu, little Bugles, Video Killed the Radio Star, little Strawberry Alarm Clock, little Rockwell, maybe a guy that's not going to produce a greatest hits album. What do you think of those numbers?
I would have probably voted for Nebraska, but I don't blame you voting for Penn State.
Yeah.
Voted for Nebraska because of the division. Don't mind voting for Penn State, though, because Nebraska. So that's
a good
kind
point.
of my take on that.
The other point with Penn State, too, 11-11 the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Right? 11-11. Yikes. All right, let's get to our feedback of the week from Ryan Mitchell. Says, hey, way to set me up for disappointment in my Gophers. Is every Big Ten fan base like this, except for Ohio State, man? Which, by the way, when you've dominated the league the way they have the last decade or so, I don't blame them whatsoever. But is every other fan base in the league like this?
I think it's actually especially Minnesota sports fans. It's especially them. I've got a buddy of mine from college.
Because of the Vikings and all their postseason failures and stuff, you think?
A friend of mine from college has written a book called Land of 10,000 Aches. And my goodness, I mean, it's like
it's a great title.
This chock full of just Minnesota sports disappointments through the last 30, 40 years.
Oh, there you go. Hopefully
you have some papal dispensation there, Ryan.
All right, so hopefully this episode wasn't a disappointment to you. Let us know what you think about what we think. Hit like, rate, share, subscribe, follow, whichever applies, however you watch, like here on YouTube, or listen, like on iTunes. Help us to find more Big Ten sports fans just like you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Remember to also follow us on Twitter at Bigger10 to keep up to date on what we think all things Big Ten in between episodes at Bigger10. For Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Dace. We'll see you next time.